Part 16. A selection from Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A selection from Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio by Pu Songlin. Translated by Herbert Allen Giles. Volume 1, Part 16, The Magic Sword. Read by Vivian Chen, March 2008, in Guangzhou, China. Ning Chaicheng was a Zhejiang man, and a good-natured, honorable fellow, fond of telling people that he had only loved once. Happening to go to Jinhua, he took shelter in a temple to the north of the city, very nice as far as ornamentation went, but overgrown with grass taller than a man's head, and evidently not so much frequented. On either side were the priest's apartments, the doors of which were ajar, with the exception of a small room on the south side, where the lock had a new appearance. In the east corner he espied a group of bamboos growing over a large pool of water lilies in flower, and being much pleased with the quiet of the place, determined to remain, more especially as, the grand examiner being in the town, all lodges had gone up in price. So he roamed about waiting till the priest should return, and in the evening a gentleman came and opened the door on the south side. Ning quickly made up to him, and with a bow informed him of his design. "There is no one here whose permission you need to ask," replied the stranger. "I am only lodging here, and if you don't object to the loneliness, I shall be very pleased to have the benefit of your society." Ning was delighted, and made himself a straw bed and put out a board for a table, as if he intended to remain some time. And that night, by the beams of the clear bright moon, they sat together in the veranda and talked. The stranger's name was Yan Shixia, and Ning thought he was a student up for the provincial examination, only his dialect was not that of a Zhejiang man. On being asked, he said he came from Shensi, and there was an air of straightforwardness about all his remarks. By and by, when their conversation was exhausted, they bade each other good night, and went to bed. But Ning, being in a strange place, was quite unable to sleep, and soon he heard sounds of voices from the room on the north side. Getting up, he peeped through a window, and saw, in a small courtyard the other side of a low wall, a woman of about 40 with an old maid servant, in a long faded gown, hump-backed and feeble-looking. They were chatting by the light of the moon, and the mistress said, "Why doesn't Xiu Qing come?" "She ought to be here by now," replied the other. "She isn't offended with you, is she?" asked the lady. "Not that I know of," answered the old servant. "But she seems to want to get trouble." "Such persons don't deserve to be treated well," said the other. And she had hardly uttered this word when up came a young girl of 17 or 18, and very nice looking. The old servant laughed and said, "Don't talk of people behind their backs. We were just mentioning you, as you come without our hearing you. But fortunately we were saying nothing bad about you. And as far as that goes," added she, "if I am a young fellow, why, I should certainly fall in love with you." "If you don't praise me," replied the girl, "I'm sure I don't know who will." And then the lady and the girl said something together, and Mr. Ning, thinking they were the family next door, turned around to sleep without paying further attention to them. In a little while no sound was to be heard, but as he was dropping off to sleep, he perceived that somebody was in the room. Jumping up in great haste, he found it was the young lady he had just seen, and detecting at once that she was going to attempt to bewitch him, sternly bade her begone. She then produced a lump of gold, which he threw away, and told her to go after it, or he would call his friend. So she had no alternative but to go, muttering something about his heart being like iron or stone. Next day a young candidate for the examination came and lodged in the east room with his servant. He, however, was killed that very night, and his servant the night after. The causes of both showing a small hole in the sole of the foot, as you bought by a hole, and from which little blood came. No one knew who had committed these murders, and when Mr. Yen came home, Ning asked him what he thought about it. Yen replied that it was the work of evils, but Ning was a brave fellow, and that didn't frighten him much. In the middle of the night, Xiao Qian appeared to him again, and said, "I have seen many men, but none with a steel cold heart like yours. You are an outright man, and I will not attempt to deceive you. I, Xiao Qian, whose family name is Nie, died when only 18, and was buried alongside of this temple. A devil then took possession of me, and employed me to bewitch people by my beauty, contrary to my inclination. There is now nothing left in this temple to slaughter, and I fear that imps will be employed to kill you." Ning was very frightened at this, and asked her what he should do. "Sleep in the same room with Mr. Yan," replied she. "What?" asked Yan. "Cannot the spirit trouble Yan?" "He is a strange man," she answered, "and they didn't like going near him." Ning then inquired how the spirits worked. "I bewitched people," said Xiao Qian, "and then they bore a hole in the foot which renders the victim senseless, and proceed to draw off the blood which the devils drink. Another method is to tempt people by false gold, the bones of some horrid demon, and if they receive it, their hearts and livers will be torn out. Each method is used according to the circumstances." Ning thanked her and asked when he ought to be prepared, to which she replied, "Tomorrow night." At the parting she wept and said, "I am about to sink into the great sea with no friendly soul at hand. But your sense of duty is boundless, and you can save me. If you will collect my bones and bury them in some quiet spot, I shall not again be subject to these misfortunes." Ning said he would do so, and asked where she lay buried. "At the foot of the aspen tree, on which there is a bird's nest," replied she, and passing out of the door, disappeared. The next day Ning was afraid that Yen might be going away somewhere, and went over early to invite him across. Wine and food were produced towards noon, and Ning, who took care not to lose sight of Yen, then asked Yen to remain there for the night. Yen declared on the ground that he liked being by himself, but Ning wouldn't hear any excuses, and carried all Yen's things to his own room, so that he had no alternative but to consent. However, he warned Ning, saying, "I know you are a gentleman and a man of honor. If you see anything you don't quite understand, I pray you not to be too inquisitive. Do not pry into my boxes, or it might be the worse for both of us." Ning promised to attend to what he said, and by and by they both lied down to sleep, and Yan, having placed his boxes on the window-sill, was soon snoring loudly. Ning himself could not sleep, and after some time he saw a figure moving stealthily outside, at length approaching the window to peep through. Its eyes flashed like lightning, and Ning, in a terrible fright, was just upon the point of calling Yan, when something flew out of the boxes like a string of white silk, and dashing against the window-sill returned at once to the box, disappearing very much like lightning. Yan heard the noise and got up. Ning all the time pretended to be asleep in order to watch what happened. The former then opened the box and took out something which he smelled and examined by the light of the moon. It was dazzlingly white like crystal, and about 2 inches in length by the width of an onion leaf in breadth. He then wiped it carefully and put it back in the broken box, saying, "A bull-faced devil that, to dare thus to break my box!" Upon which he went back to bed. But Ning, who was lost in astonishment, arose and asked him what it all meant, telling at the same time what he himself had seen. "As you and I are good friends," replied Yan, "I won't make any secret of it. The fact is, I am a Taoist priest. But for the window-sill the devil would have been killed. As it is, he is badly wounded." Ning asked him what it was he had there whipped up, and he told him it was his sword, on which he had smelled the presence of the devil. At Ning's request he produced the weapon, a bright little miniature of a sword, and from that time Ning held his friend in higher esteem than ever. Next day he found traces of blood outside the window which led around to the north of the temple, and there among a number of graves he discovered the aspen tree with the bird's nest at its summit. He then fulfilled his promise and prepared to go home, Yan giving him a farewell banquet, and presenting him with an old leather case which he said contained a sword, and would keep a distance from him all devils and bogies. Ning then wished to learn a little of Yan's art, but the latter replied that although he might accomplish this easily enough, being as he was an outright man, yet he was well off in life, and not in a condition where it would be of any advantage to him. Ning then, pretending that he had a younger sister buried here, dug up Xiu Qian's bones, and having wrapped them up in grave cloth, hired a boat and set out on his way home. On his arrival, as his library looked towards the open country, he made a grave harbide and buried the bones there, sacrificing and invoking Xiu Qian as follows: "In pity for your lonely ghost, I have placed your remains near my humble cottage, where we shall be near each other, and no devil will dare annoy you. I pray you reject not my sacrifice, poor though it be." After this he was proceeding home when he suddenly heard himself addressed from behind, the voice asking him not to hurry, and turning around he beheld Xiu Qian, who thanked him, saying, "Were I to die 10 times for you, I could not discharge my debt. Let me go home with you and wait upon your father and mother. You will not repent it." Looking closely at her, he observed that she had a beautiful complexion, and feet as small as bamboo shoots, being altogether much prettier now that he came to see her by daylight. So they went together to his home, and begged her to wait a while. Ning ran into to tell his mother, to the very great surprise of the old lady. Now Ning's wife had been ill for a long time, and his mother advised him not to say a word about it to her, for fear of frightening her. In the middle of which in rushed Xiu Qian, and threw herself on the ground before them. "This is the young lady," said Ning. Whereupon his mother, in some alarm, turned her attention to Xiu Qian, who cried out, "A lonely orphan, without brother or sister, the object of your son's kindness and compassion, best to be allowed to give her poor services as some return for the favours shown." Ning's mother, seeing that she was a nice, pleasant-looking girl, began to lose fear of her, and replied, "Madam, the preference you show for my son is highly pleasant to an old body like myself, but this is the only hope of our family, and I hardly dare agree to his taking a double wife. Oh, I have but one motive in what I ask," answered Hsiao qian, "and if you have no faith in disembodied people, then let me regard him as my brother, and live under your protection, serving you like a daughter." Ning's mother could not resist her straightforward manner, and Hsiao qian asked to be allowed to see Ning's wife, but this was denied on the plea that the lady was ill. Hsiao qian then went to the kitchen and got ready the dinner, running about the place as if she had lived there all her life. Ning's mother was, however, much afraid of her, and would not let her sleep in the house. So Hsiao qian went to the library, and was just entering when suddenly she fell back a few steps, and began to walking hurriedly backwards and forwards in front of the door. Ning, seeing this, called out and asked her what it meant, to which she replied, "The presence of that sort frightens me, and that's why I could not accompany you on your way home." Ning at once understood her, and hung up the sword-case in another place, whereupon she entered, lighted a candle, and sat down. For some time she did not speak. At length, asking Ning if he studied at night or not, "For," said she, "when I was little, I used to repeat the Leng Yan Zhi, but now I have forgotten more than half, and therefore I should like to borrow a copy, and when you are at leisure in the evening you might hear me." Ning said he would, and they sat silently there for some time, after which Hsiao qian went away and took up her quarters elsewhere. Morning and night she waited on Ning's mother, bringing water for her to wash in, occupying herself with household matters, and endeavouring to please her in every way. In the evening before she went to bed, she would always go in and repeat a little of the Zhi, and leave as soon as she thought Ning was getting sleepy. Now the illness of Ning's wife had given his mother a great deal of extra trouble, more in fact than she was equal to, but ever since Hsiao qian's arrival all this was changed, and Ning's mother felt kindly disposed to the girl in consequence, gradually growing to regard her almost as her own child, and forgetting quite that she was a spirit. Accordingly she didn't make her leave the house at night, and Hsiao qian, whom being a devil had not tasted meat or drink since her arrival, now began at the end of 6 months to take a little thin gruel. Mother and son alike become very fond of her, and henceforth never mentioned what she really was. Neither were strangers able to detect the fact. By and by, Ning's wife died, and his mother secretly wished him to espouse Hsiao qian, though she rather dreaded any unfortunate consequences that might arise. This Hsiao qian perceived, and seizing an opportunity, said to Ning's mother, "I have been with you for more than a year, and you ought to know something of my disposition. Because I was unwilling to injure travellers, I followed your son hither. There was no other motive, and as your son has shown himself one of the best of men, I will now remain with him for 3 years, in order that he may obtain for me some mark of imperial approbation which will do me honour in the realms below." Ning's mother knew that she meant no evil, but hesitated to put the family's hopes of posterity into jeopardy. Hsiao qian, however, reassured her by saying that Ning would have 3 sons, and that life would not be interrupted by his marrying her. On the strength of this the marriage was arranged, to the great joy of Ning, a feast prepared, and friends and relatives invited. And when in response to a call the bride herself came forth in her gay wedding dress, the beholders took her rather for a fairy than for evil. After this, numerous of congratulatory presents were given by the various female members of the family, who vied with one another in making her acquaintance. And this Hsiao Qian returned by gifts of plenty of flowers, done by herself, in which she was very skilful, the receivers being extremely proud of such marks of her friendship. One day she was leaning at the window in a despondent mood, when suddenly she asked where the suitcase was. "Oh," replied Ning, "as you seemed afraid of it, I moved you elsewhere. I have now been so long under the influence of surrounding life," said Hsiao Qian, "that I shall not be afraid of it any more. Let's hang it on the bed." "Why so?" asked Ning. "For the last 3 days," explained she, "I have been much agitated in mind, and I am afraid that that devil at the temple, angry at my escape, may come suddenly and carry me off." So Ning brought the suitcase, and Hsiao Qian, after examining it closely, remarked, "This is where the magician puts people. I wondered how many were slain before it gets old and worn out as it is now. Even now when I look at it, my flesh creeps." The case was then hung up, and next day removed to over the door. At night they sat down and watched, Hsiao Qian warning Ning not to go to sleep, and suddenly something fell down like a bird. Hsiao Qian in a fright got behind the curtain, but Ning looked at the thing and found it was a heap of darkness, with glaring eyes and a bloody mouth, coming straight to the door. Stealthily creeping up, it made a grab at the suitcase, and seemed about to tear it in pieces, when bam! The suitcase became as big as a wardrobe, and from it a devil protruded part of its body and dragged the imp in. Nothing more was heard, and the suitcase resumed its original size. Ning was greatly alarmed, but Hsiao Qian came out rejoicing, and said, "That's an end of my troubles." In the suitcase they found only a few quarts of clear water, nothing else. After these events, Ning took his daughter's degree, and Hsiao Qian bore him a son. He then took a concubine, and had 1 more son by each, all of whom became in time distinguished men. Footnotes 1. He told him it was his sword. Every Taoist priest has a magic sword, corresponding to our magician's wand. 2. Bamboo shoots, which, well cooked, are a very good substitute for asparagus. 3. Being a devil, had not tasted meat or drink since her arrival. Disembodied spirits are supposed to have no shadow, and have but very little appetite. 4. Some are called imperial approbation, such as are from time to time bestowed upon virtuous widows and wives, filial sons and daughters, and others. These consist of some laudatory scroll or tablet, and are much prized by the family of the recipient. 5. I have now been so long under the influence of surrounding life. These disembodied spirits are unable to stand for any length of time the light and life of the upper world. Darkness and death, being as it, were necessary to their existence and comfort. End of The Magic Sword.